Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in from truly across the continent today and beyond. My name is Jesse. I'm here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and I know we've got some new faces in the crowd today. So if you are new to us, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And you're catching me on an even more exciting day than usual here, because this is the final big day of our epic series in conjunction with If Then. So every February 11th is the International Day of Women in STEM. So what we do every February is kick out all the men and spend the entire month solely featuring the most amazing women in science and exploration on planet Earth. And this year, we got an amazing partner. If Then is the greatest initiative ever, showcasing over 125 ambassadors, everyone from cave divers to astronaut explorers. We've had archaeologists on, neuroscientists. It's been a wild ride in this series, and I really encourage you to check it out and the entire If Then She Can slate of resources. So many great things to discover. Now, today, before I go in with our speaker introduction, I want to note we will have a Kahoot together. So if you're live with us, you're on YouTube between the talk and Q&A in about 25 minutes, we're going to play along with a little quiz. If you want to do that, feel free to bring that up in a separate tab. Now, when I was setting up this series, Becca was our kickoff person. She helped make this all possible, so a big thank you to Becca. But the first person after that I reached out to was Kristen Lear, because she is a longtime friend of the show. She is an amazing bat biologist. She gets to study the world's only flying mammal, one of the coolest groups of animals on planet Earth. And as I was saying to our kids before, a lot of people are afraid of bats. I'm lucky. I grew up and I was just obsessed with bats from a really young age. They are amazing, and I'm sure you will feel the same way by the end of this talk. But Kristen is going to challenge some misconceptions, give you guys an understanding, blow your mind with how diverse and beautiful this incredible group of creatures are. And without further ado, I'm going to stop talking about it. I'm going to turn you over to the expert to blow your mind. Hi, Kristen. Welcome back.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm super excited to be here today to talk all about bats. They're my favorite animal, so I could talk all day about bats, but I know we have just a short time. But yeah, I want to share about what it's like being a bat biologist or bat conservationist, kind of the cool things that I get to do as a bat conservationist, and of course, share some really cool bat facts so that we can all learn to appreciate and love bats for the important things that they do for us. So welcome to Women Blaze Trails. I'm very excited to be here as part of this series with the If Then Ambassador Program. This program has been amazing, so thank you all for joining and for tuning in to learn about some really cool careers that women have in STEM fields. So being a bat conservationist is a really cool job because you get to see lots of different types of bats around the world. These are some of the bats, some of the photos that I've taken of bats in Australia. This one's in Texas. This is in Mexico. And also this one in the bottom right is in Texas. So I've gotten to travel all around the world to study bats, to learn how to protect them, and then work with people to actually do conservation projects to protect them. So in my opinion, being a bat conservationist is the best job ever. I'm definitely a little bit biased, but it is a really cool job that gets you out, it gets you exploring. These are some pictures from caves that you get to crawl through some really small, crevices and go deep into caves to find these little roosting bats so that we can study them. I get to explore cliff sides and hillsides to look for new roosts, look for new caves where these bats are roosting. So you get to go explore some really cool areas because bats are found everywhere in the world. So you really can go anywhere in the world to study bats, except Antarctica. They're not found there. As a night owl, I am a night owl, so I love to stay up late. I'm often, up at midnight, 1 o'clock. It's just when I'm working the best. It's when my brain's the sharpest. So as a bat biologist, I get to often stay up all night, get to do work in the middle of the night when most people are sleeping and a lot of other animals are sleeping. But as a bat biologist, we get to be out there and get to hear the cool night sound, to get to be under the stars while we're studying the bats that are flying around. And then, of course, one of the best parts of the job is being able to actually handle up close and get to see these different bat species. This is one of my first bats, an eastern red bat in Texas, when I was an undergraduate. So this was sophomore year of college. And I actually got to go out and we caught bats to be able to study them, to be able to track them. So one of my favorite parts of the job is actually getting trained on how to how to handle bats and how to actually study them. But college was not my first, foray, my start into bat conservation. I actually had a much earlier start in bat conservation. So this was my Girl Scout troop in middle school. Here I am. This is my mom, my troop leader, and this was our troop. And as a Girl Scout troop, we would do night hikes, we would do campouts in the summer. And during those campouts and the night hikes, we could see bats flying around at night, in our yards or in the camps. And just seeing those bats flying around really piqued my interest in learning about these really cool animals that most people don't know about. And so when I was in 6th grade, when I was 12, I decided that I wanted to do something to help bats for my Girl Scout Silver Award project. So this is me with my dad building 4 bat houses and putting them up in a local park in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I grew up. This was my first hands-on experience with bat conservation. And we got the 4 bat houses. My mom, my grandpa, and my dad helped me. And we put them up in this park in my hometown. And I was so excited to get bats in the bat house. And a few weeks later, I went to check on those bat houses in the park, and somebody had torn down the bat houses. Somebody had vandalized my bat houses. So you can imagine, I was 12. I had built these with my own hands, and I was devastated. I was crushed that somebody would do that. But, despite them not being successful and not housing bats, and having to be taken down, I still learned a lot. And I learned that I really wanted to learn more about bats. And so I started researching online all that I could about bats. I learned that there are over 1,450 species or types of bats all around the world. Back then, there were not that many known species. And I learned that 1 in 5 mammal species is a bat. That's a lot of bats. And I also learned that bats are not rodents. They are not flying mice or rats with wings. They are their own order of mammals. So they are not related to rodents. They're actually more closely related to primates, to humans, than they are to rodents. And like I said, they are mammals, just like horses, cats, dogs, just like us. They have fur, but they are the only mammal that can fly. And like I mentioned earlier, I did learn that bats are found on all continents except Antarctica. So basically anywhere you see the orange is where bats can be found. There's even bats in Alaska. I believe there's 5 species up in Alaska. There's bats in Siberia, Australia, really everywhere around the world. And I like to think about bats, as I was learning more about them, as superheroes. This is a Bat Brigade comic that I found on the internet, but they really are superheroes in my opinion. So one of the superpowers that I learned about bats is pollination. So some bat species drink nectar from flowers and they pollinate those plants. And I wanted to show this picture because can you all see what this big pink thing coming out of this bat's mouth is into this tube of nectar? That is the bat's tongue. So these bats that drink nectar can have tongues that are 1.5 times their body length. So that would be like if you stood up and you put your hand in the air, your tongue would be as long as from your fingertips all the way to the floor. That's a really long tongue. But they actually have a special kind of cavity in their chest where the tongue kind of hangs out when it's not being used. So it's not just flopping around while they're flying. And they use these tongues. These are some videos we caught during my job here at Bat Conservation International. They use those long tongues to get deep inside flowers and lap up the nectar to drink it. And then when they're doing this, when they're in the process of drinking, they get covered in pollen. You can see all this yellow stuff is pollen from the flower. And so they spread pollen to tons of plants around in a night. And they tend to spread more pollen than birds or insects. They get much more covered than birds or insects. And also, bats tend to carry the pollen farther distances in a night than birds and insects. So bats are some of the most effective pollinators of some of the plants that we know and love and use in our everyday lives. So wild bananas, we get bananas. Wild bananas are bat pollinated, mangoes, certain nut species, and my favorite, cacao, which we use to make chocolate. All of these are either exclusively or partially pollinated by bats. So the next time you're eating any of these things, you can say, "Thank you, bats, for bringing me this food." Now, the second superpower of bats that I learned about is seed dispersal. So some bats around the world eat fruit. You can see this fruit bat here has got a fruit in its mouth, and it's shoving the fruit into its mouth, and it's going to squeeze out the juice and drink the juice, and then it's going to spit out the rest of the fruit. Or if it ingests the pulp of the fruit, it will eventually, poop out the rest of that fruit. And what is in the fruit? What do you usually spit out when you eat an apple, for example? Seeds. And those seeds grow into new plants. So these bats that are eating fruit, they actually help spread seed. They are seed dispersers, and they help regrow places like tropical rainforests that have been cleared or degraded. These bats are helping regrow those rainforest areas. So again, another superpower of bats. And the third superpower of bats that I learned is insect pest control. So most bats around the world, about 70% of bat species around the world, are insectivorous, which means they eat insects. So they're eating things like moths, like in this picture, this moth's about to get eaten. They eat beetles. They do eat some mosquitoes. And when they're doing this during the summer months, some of the bat species, especially pregnant and lactating moms, when they're really high energy demands, can eat up to half their body weight in insects in a night during the summer. So if you had to eat enough quarter-pounder hamburgers to be like a bat in a night, how many hamburgers would you have to eat in a night? Now, I won't make you go through all the math, but you can do that later. But depending on how much you weigh, about 200 to 600 hamburgers you would have to be eating to be like a bat in one night. That's a lot of food. But these bats are flying, which requires a lot of energy, so they really need to eat a lot of food. And like I said, some of those insects that these bats are eating are mosquitoes. So the bats are helping control mosquito populations, and they're also helping control agricultural pest insect populations. So insects that destroy our crops like corn, cotton, and pecans, bats are helping protect those crops. So that benefits us. So bats are superheroes. Now, unfortunately, bats around the world, like many other wildlife species, are under threat. Many bat species are under threat from this picture here: habitat loss and degradation. As we're clearing forests to build houses, or as we are exploring caves sometimes, if you're going in a cave to have fun, you might be disturbing the bats. All of that habitat disturbance and habitat loss is threatening a lot of bats around the world. And that's really the number one threat to bats worldwide is habitat loss. Now we have the people picture. So in some places, persecution by people has led to bat declines, or hunting by people, which can be done relatively sustainably, but in some cases it's not. And when people fear bats, sometimes I've heard of instances where people will go into caves because they think vampire bats are there, and they'll dynamite the cave, or they'll set fire to all the bats in the cave to get rid of them. So obviously that's a big threat to some species. And then diseases like white nose syndrome. This, you can see here why it's called that. White nose syndrome is a disease of bats found in the United States and North America and in Canada. And it's caused by a fungus, an invasive fungus that grows on the bats' noses and ears and wings during hibernation in the winter. And it's kind of like poison ivy. It starts itching and eating at the skin. And the bats wake up from hibernation. They're really hungry, so they go out to look for food, but it's the middle of winter, so there's no food. So these bats are unfortunately starving to death or freezing to death. And this disease, white nose syndrome, has killed millions of bats over the past decade or so. And so these are just some of the threats that are facing bats worldwide. There are other threats that are, of course, ongoing. But that's why, as I was learning about bats as a kid, I was really thinking, like, I love animals. I really was interested in bats. Is there something I can do to help bats? And so when I went to Ohio Wesleyan University for my undergrad, and I got a Bachelor of Arts in Zoology. And this is when I got my first research experience with bats. Got to actually go down to Texas and help with a PhD students project in Texas. And we were looking at the ecosystem services of bats in pecan orchards in Texas. So we were looking at, are these bats eating the pest insects that eat pecan crops? We found out that yes, they were. So it was really good that these pecan farmers, had these bats on their farms to help control those insects. But yeah, I got to catch some really cool bats, and then I decided I wanted to do something for my own research to help bats. And so I decided for my honors thesis, my last year of college, I wanted to, just like in middle school with my Girl Scout project, I wanted to build bat houses again. But this time I wanted to test out 2 different types of bat houses. A standard, these aren't finished yet, but a standard kind of flat bat house, which is the normal bat house you see. And then I also wanted to test out a rocket box design. You can see these, they look like a rocket because that's how they're built. So I built, this time instead of 4 bat houses, I built 18 bat houses. And I put them up all over the pecan orchards that we were working with. Got to get my hands dirty with installing them on poles, and that was quite the process. But yeah, we put them up, and then I waited to see if any bats would move in and which house they would prefer. And here you go. Turns out they loved the bat houses. This is in the evening when the bats are emerging. They're coming out of the bat house to go feed in the pecan orchards. And there were hundreds of bats that moved into my bat houses. I was beyond thrilled, you can imagine, that this time my bat houses were actually successful and were not vandalized and torn down. And one of the coolest things was, this is a picture I took looking up into the bat house, one of the bat houses, and you can see there's little bats in there. And one morning or one evening when the mom bats were leaving, I looked up into the bat house and I saw little tiny little baby bats. The mom bats had chosen one of my bat houses to use as a maternity roost to give birth to and raise their babies. So again, you can imagine how thrilled I was. I actually might have cried a little because I was just so happy that these bat houses were being used by the bats, especially by the mom bats. So very, very exciting for me. And then another really cool, exciting part of the work that I was doing with these bat houses was monitoring them at night to see the use of the houses. And I got to use some really cool technology. This is a thermal imaging camera video. So it's picking up the body heat and all the heat from the environment. It's picking up the body heat of the bats, and you can see them landing on the bat house and then crawling up into, there it goes, crawling up into the bat house. So yeah, just got to use some really cool technology during this study, which is one of the another cool things about working with bats is the technology. And then after college, I decided by then I knew that bat conservation was my passion. I wanted to follow a career in bat conservation. So I knew I wanted to go to grad school eventually, but wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do for grad school. So I ended up applying for and getting a Fulbright scholarship to go travel and live in Australia for a year after college. And during this time, I got to study a critically endangered bat species, the southern bentwing bat here. And I got to monitor their populations to see how the population was doing. They're not doing great, but again, I got to use some cool infrared camera technology to monitor the bats as they come out of the bat cave. And during that time, this is also a time that I discovered my passion for sharing about bats with the public. So I got to do this picture here. I got to do some classroom presentations about bats to some local schools. And I also got to be on the local public radio and talk about my research project, which was pretty fun. My first time being on the radio to talk about bats. And then finally, that year was over, and I finally kind of had figured out what I wanted to do for my PhD work. So a couple years later, I started my PhD at the University of Georgia, and I was studying, this time I decided I wanted to study pollinating bats that feed on nectar with those really long tongues that we saw. So I got to go down to Mexico every summer for 4 summers and live down there for 3 months or so. And I got to work with these little nectar feeding bats, one of which is endangered. And I was basically trying to figure out what they need for their feeding requirements. So we got to use some really cool infrared technology to monitor the bats. You can see the videos here. They are coming and feeding on this agave plant, which we use, if you know, to make tequila and mezcal. So again, these agave plants are very important for people. And you can see the bats coming up and feeding. So these are all pictures or videos that I got to take. And then I was also working with the rural communities in Mexico, definitely practicing my Spanish. And I was doing interviews with them about how they use agaves and how we could join bat conservation efforts with agave restoration efforts. And now I work basically my dream job. I finished my PhD in 2020 during the pandemic, and then started a few weeks later at Bat Conservation International. And we are a nonprofit, so we work around the world to protect bat species and prevent bat extinctions. So I get to actually continue my job as Agave Restoration Program Director. So I get to continue working with these nectar bats that I worked on in grad school and working with the communities to restore agaves for these bats. So basically my dream job. And before we end, I just always like to end on a positive note on what you can do to help bats, because there's lots of things that we all can do in our everyday lives, either directly or indirectly, to help bats. So what can you do? Well, you can put up a bat house. This is particularly useful if there's bats roosting in your building and you want to exclude them from your building, like from your house. Providing a bat house before you do that exclusion is a really good idea to help give them a new home. Or if there's ongoing construction in your area that bats might be getting kicked out of their natural habitat, bat houses can come in there. So there's lots of great resources. Think we can share resources in some way on like plans for building bat houses or where to buy them online, because you want to make sure to get a good one if you are going to do this. But I like this video. This was an infrared scope up into a bat house, one of the bat houses I built during grad school in Georgia. You can see 2 little bats chilling out during the day in the little bat house. You can, if you have a garden, a school garden or your own backyard, you can plant a bat garden in your yard. I know this is blurry, but we have instructions online about what types of plants to plant. But basically the idea is you plant night blooming flowers that open at night that attract nocturnal insects that the insect eating bats can then chow down on. So you'd create this garden, you'd have your own little food chain happening in your garden, and you'd be helping feed these insectivorous bats. I love this. I did this as a class in 3rd grade. We adopted a puffin from a zoo. But there are some organizations, including Bat Conservation International, that you can adopt a bat from. Obviously, you don't get a real bat because we cannot have bats as pets. But you get a plush stuffed animal, and you get information about the species or the bat that you're helping. In some cases, like Bat World Sanctuary, your donation actually goes to supporting the bats that they're caring for in their rehab center. So this is a really fun thing to do as a class or as a scout troop. I remember, like I said, I did it in 3rd grade and really enjoyed it. And finally, I think one of the easiest things that we can all do is tell our friends and family how neat and how important bats are. Bats get a bad rap a lot of times, but they really shouldn't. They're not scary animals. They're just like any other animal. They're really cool. There's a lot to learn, and they're really important for the ecosystem and for us. So when you leave here, I want you to share at least one thing that you learned today about bats with your friends and family. Obviously, the more the better, but please share at least one thing and just spread the word about how cool bats are. And finally, never too early to start. Whatever your passion is, whatever your interest is, it's never too early to start reading, to start learning, to start connecting with groups that are doing the work that you're interested in. So never too early to start. It's also never too late to start if you are further along. So don't let anything stop you. And with that, thank you. And I think we've got some time for questions.
We've got lots of time for questions,
Yay.
But first and foremost, thank you for such an incredible program. The grouping of pictures of bat species where you got all the heads and they look so wonky and fantastic. It's still one of my favorite things in all of nature. They're just the most magnificent creatures. I will bring it up again so you can see this. Like they're so awesome. They're the coolest. Yeah. I don't know what everyone else's favorite are. The big, huge schnoz guy in the bottom.
Oh yes, the hammer-headed bat. God, they're really cool. I've never seen them in person, but they make a really big honking noise with that. The males do with that nose to attract females. So
even better. Chef's kiss for that story. Kristen, as you said, we're going to do questions in just a minute, but first we're going to do our Kahoot. So test them understanding, have a little bit of fun. If you want to join, and if you don't, you can just yell out the answers in your class. But for those who are new to this, the faster you answer, the more points you get. What you win is Kristen and I's everlasting respect. So that's pretty cool. Kristen, you can help us out at the end of every question when there's a few seconds to go if you want to chime in with a little hint du jour. Okay. But we're going to dive in, and then when we're done, we're going to do our Milton, Louisiana class first for questions and take any from our YouTube friends as well, alongside Mr. Rutledge and Miss Dennison's class. All right. Question 1. How many kinds of bat are there? We talked about this at the beginning. Is it 50, nearly 1,500, 125, or 9? How many bats are there in the world? What do we think? Dun, 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 dun,
I hope I cover all these questions in the PowerPoint. Now I'm like, oh gosh, did I cover them?
I made this up in advance, and this is a bit of all these questions are from the longer Kahoot that we're doing together as well, which is fantastic. But everyone got literally 100% of you got that right. Yes, 1,450 bats and counting, which is wild. They are a very diverse group of creatures. Knowing B takes our lead. Question 2. Now, of the bats.
Oh, we didn't cover this.
I always like to throw this in any bat thing. So are all of them vampires? Do all bats suck blood? Or do 3 kinds suck blood? 20%, 1 in every 5 bats, or no bats are vampires? It's a myth. There are no vampire bats. What do we think?
Sorry, folks. I didn't cover this. Take your wildest guess.
This is good. we get to play around with anything. There's no stakes. I promise. So some of you thought no bats are vampires, but 4 of you got this right. There are a few kinds of vampire bat that actually do suck blood, which is wild.
There's 3.
They're beautiful. The picture of the bat in that was a vampire bat, and they are a magnificent group of creatures. That completely threw our leaderboard into disarray with Glowing Deer taking the lead. Where it's mass chaos. True or false? Bats are blind. A famous thing, blind as a bat. It's literally a phrase. We've all heard this many times. Is it true? I'll give you a hint. In this picture, that bat does not look blind. He's got some pretty big eyes going on there. The better to see you with. 50-50 split. Kristen, so let's
wow. I got more to do in my job. Yeah, bats are not blind. All bats have eyes and all bats can see. Some also use echolocation, but even the ones that use echolocation are not blind.
Just like, so vision is our main sense, but we can still hear, and that's important. And so bats, maybe hearing is their main sense in a lot of ways, or many kinds of bats, but they can all see. And I'm glad we had that question. Leaderboard is all over the place. Okay. Honest Hamsters now in our lead. It's mass chaos. The answer to this question is more than 1. It might be all of them, and it might be 2, it might be 3. Why are bats important? Is it because they're major pollinators? Is it because they eat insect pests that impact crops? Is it because learning about bats has helped us develop medicines? Or is it all animals are important? I could have gone with something else for number 4. I will say outright, D is correct. Everything has inherent value. You should value all animals. Who wants to wipe out a species on planet Earth? And so all 4 were correct.
Yay. Yep.
A few of you were iffy on the medicines, but with things like vampire bats, the compounds that they use to suck our blood and drink it so efficiently are fantastic in all array of medical technologies, which is very cool.
Yep.
Kristen, here's our leaderboard.
This is exciting. This is exciting.
Artist Hamster third. If you are any of these folks, let us know who you are. Inspired Octopus is number 2. And number 1 for all the marbles by 6 points. Close ratio is Amazing Dog. Way to go, everybody.
Oh, cool. That was exciting.
It was exciting. I love the goods. We're going to head to, oh, wow, Miss Dennison's class is losing their mind. I'm guessing they're Amazing Dog. We're going to head to Milton, Louisiana. Come on in, guys, and take us away with the first question. Hey.
What type of bats are in Louisiana?
Ooh, good question. So I actually don't know how many species are there, but one of the most common you would find are red bats, I believe. They actually are flying around a lot of times during the evening, and you can often see them before the sun has even set. So they're one of the most common. Big brown bats, pretty common. Yeah, I'm curious. That's a good question. Let's see.
I'm trying to Google this frantically as we go. I can check in on this as we keep going with questions, Kristen.
Okay.
Yeah. Great question, guys.
11.
Right.
11 species.
11 species. Oh, that's interesting. I would have thought more. Louisiana tends to have a lot of wildlife. The southern U.S. tends to be teeming with stuff. That's interesting to me. Mr. Rutledge's class, we're going to head to Ontario. Come on in, Barry, and take us away, guys.
Hi.
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 Do different bats have different echolocation? And do they scramble each other's echolocation?
I didn't get the second part of that.
Yeah, Mr. Rutledge, can you repeat the second half? Yeah.
Yeah, the question was, do different bats have different echolocation? And if they do they scramble each other's echolocation?
Interesting.
Oh my gosh. Wow, what a great question. So yes, different bats have different frequencies of echolocation. So, different frequencies, different volume. Some are really loud. And yes, we can actually distinguish species by their echolocation call. They each have unique calls for the most part. So we can tell species apart. And yeah, they actually have to sometimes, if they're really similar in echolocation, they actually have to adjust so that they don't jam each other. It's pretty fascinating how they do it, the physics of it. Yeah,
one of my favorite things with echolocation, and we've never had a question like that before, so thank you so much for that.
Awesome.
Is sometimes when they call, it's so loud, their ears need to shut themselves off as they call, and they do that many times a second. It's 50 screams as they're shutting their ear on and off.
Yeah.
So that they hear the bounce back, but they don't hear the actual scream because it would deafen them.
To put it in perspective, if we could hear their frequency, it would be the volume of a jet engine. That's what they're it would be like us standing next to a jet engine. That's what they're doing all the time, which is
amazing.
Nice. They're screaming.
Miss Dennison's class, we're going to head to Miller Elementary. Holson, hi guys. Unmute your mic. Come on in and check in with us. Take your question.
Oh, I love the bad hat. That's so cool. I love it. That's so cool. I love it.
Are bats predators or prey? Or are they both?
Ooh, both. Good question. Bats are both predator and prey. So most bat species, the ones that we have here in the U.S., are small, and they are mostly prey for hawks, owls, snakes, cats. But there are bats around the world that eat meat. There's bats that fish and eat. They actually go fishing and eat fish. There's bats that eat amphibians like frogs. Some bats eat birds and rodents. And there are even some bats that eat other smaller bat species. So pretty cool.
Fantastic question. I encourage all our classes, look up fishing bats because it's wild and the fish look so perplexed. What is happening? It's ridiculous. We're going to take one from YouTube and then we're going to do another round with all our classes. Cookie wants to know, in the heat vision video, why was the pole going up as hot?
Oh, good question. So that pole was metal in that thermal imaging video. So that was metal, and it was in the evening that I was recording. So it was in the daytime, basically right after the day. So that metal was still pretty hot. So that's why it was showing up as hot.
Easy answer. Great question, guys. All right, we're going to head back to Milton. Come on in, guys, and take us away. Hey.
Hello.
Do bats eat bananas?
Ooh.
So yeah, they do. Actually, if you Google bat eating banana, there's some really cute like rehab pictures of fruit bats like with their cheeks shoved full of bananas. They're really cute. But yeah, they'll eat bananas, mangoes. They will eat fruit in the wild too.
I think I have cause to say this every time I bring you on, but kids, if you can find something in your life that you are as passionate about as Kristen is about bats, you are set. It doesn't matter if it's art or history or sports or music, whatever. Find something that makes your face hurt from smiling at the end of talking about it for half an hour, and you are golden. Mr. Rutledge, come on back in, guys, and take us away. Hello.
Are there any types of bats that are dangerous?
Who are dangerous?
Good question. So, I mean, not really. I mean, all bats have teeth and can bite if they're scared. That's why we tell people, if you find a bat on the ground, don't pick it up. It could be scared, but no, they're not dangerous. They don't come after you. They're just flying around, kind of like birds. Birds in your yard, same thing.
Yep. Quite interesting, actually, how many people are afraid of birds as well. Flying things generally want to avoid you. They're not coming to hit you. I know it's kind of alarming that anything can fly, but it's going to be okay. I do promise. Kristen, we're going to take one more question. Time flies when you're having fun in these broadcasts. We're going to head back to Miss Dennison's crew. Come on back in Halston. And if you have any more questions, I know this about Kristen, you can email us at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We will find your bat answer. So if there's more that you wanted to cover today, please bug us. You all have our email address, and we'll happily get back. But Miss Dennison, come on in.
Hi.
What is a tough experience you've had with a bat?
Ooh, no pressure.
Wait, what is it? What?
The best experience you've had with a bat, like the top one ever.
Oh my gosh, top one. So in that one picture, I don't remember if you remember it, or don't know if you remember I got to go in this cave that had 40,000 bats in it in Australia. And it had those, bats in it for thousands and thousands of years. So you can imagine over time what happens with, that many bats. They poop a lot, right? So the guano in the cave had accumulated to like this gigantic 30-foot mound in the cave, in this giant cave. And so I had to actually walk up the giant pile of guano to install some research equipment in the cave. So yeah, I think that was one of my favorite experiences. It was like really gross, but really, really cool at the same time.
Sometimes when you're a biologist, you get to climb giant mounds of poo in caves surrounded by 40,000 animals. Now, and this mound, by the way, like it's not just, there's usually insects on these.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah, there's lots of insects, invertebrates eating the poop. I mean, the poop is great for the cave ecosystem, so it keeps those insects alive in the cave. So yeah, it was like glistening, crawling, guano.
I'm not as cool a biologist as Kristen, but it is my backdrop, and you can know that you're wanting to be a biologist in your career if the idea of climbing up a cockroach or bug-covered pile of poo in a cave sounds amazing to you. You should probably be a biologist, because there's not many of us, but that is a lot of fun. Kristen, this has been a riot as always. Thank you so much. I want to stress everyone to check out Bat Conservation International. They do amazing work. I'm going to email this to all your teachers. If you want to build a bat box, if you want to learn about bats, they have like everything you could ever want and more. I also encourage, of course, this is our If Then series. So ifthenshecan.org, 124 other amazing ambassadors alongside Kristen. So much to discover there. And this program's on YouTube. So if you want to share this with family and friends, fulfill your mission of telling your people about bats, you can head to our YouTube channel and do just that. But before we wrap up and bring in all our kids to say thank you and farewell, is there any last message you want to share with us about bats, your career, anything to wrap us up with?
Just, yeah, like you said earlier, whatever your passion is, just start learning now. I mean, it's never too early to start. I love bats, but obviously it's not everyone's cup of tea. So just find what you're interested in and start learning.
A message we've had all week long from cave divers and explorers and neuroscientists and more. It's been such a great series. Kristen, thank you so much for all this. And more than me saying thank you, I'm going to bring in our classes, Dr. Kizier's class, Mr. Rutledge's class, Miss Dennison, unmute your mic. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.